Oh hey guys, it's nice to see you back in London Onion's humble home. So awesome stuff. Now today he has another class comparison for Defiance 2050. But I won't keep you at the front door. So come make yourself comfortable in the sitting room and you guys can get started.
Whoa, what's good guys? Nice of you to join us. Now please excuse my voice. I managed to get a miraculous case of laryngitis. Long story short, don't use ionic air purifiers. Now for those who visited when I was showing my complete class comparison, you may have noticed that there were a couple ties in some of the factors used for evaluation. For this niche comparison, we're going to be looking at the Assassin and the Demolitionist class as our two powerhouses, both of which tied for offensive capabilities. Ultimately, I will try to determine which of the two has the greater offensive edge. So to keep things as consistent as possible, we're going to break down what I mean by offensive capabilities, go through a quick threat evaluation, and then we'll conduct the comparison. Just to be clear though, similar to our class comparison, we won't take much of a focus on numbers as the variables are seemingly infinite, but we'll be focusing on advantages or edges in combat. Alright, so we'll get started. Junior, you mind hitting the TV, bud? So for those who were here last time when I conducted my complete class comparison, one of the factors for evaluation was offensive capabilities. Now, the constituents of offensive capabilities was general damage output, which is essentially the extent of one's damage capabilities and buffs, hazard control, which is one's ability to eliminate tough enemies efficiently, and lastly, crowd control, which doesn't need an explanation. Now, this comparison is going to be more focused on the crowd control and hazard control aspects, since both classes are quite strong in their damage buffs and skills. Now from Defiance's point of view, when the scoreboard shows up, it is possible for the Arc Hunter with the most kills to have a lower score than those with lower kills after a major arcfall or siege. Anecdotally speaking, I have managed to get myself in relatively good standing after competing in an arcfall, siege, or some kind of mission even though I joined late and had less kills, meaning that damage output is a factor, but not the only one. The effect kills can have on score is majorly dependent of course on the enemies one focuses on. If one manages to defeat more of the tough enemies, they are going to get a major increase in score, as they require much more damage. This is, however, dependent on hazard to crowd ratio. Long story short, tougher enemies tend to carry more value, provided one can defeat them efficiently. One important side note, how score is calculated is admittedly complicated and unclear. Damage, kills, enemy types, and aiding teammates all seem to contribute to one's score, but this goes beyond our evaluation of threat. The frequency of hazards, however, increases significantly as waves progress, whether they are in arcfalls or sieges. This implicates a higher difficulty as hazards increase, meaning they are more of a threat. From a player's point of view, threat is mainly a result of how much damage an enemy can do. Now, crowds can be lethal in the correct numbers, assuming one is playing solo. There are, however, clear differences between what a crowd can do and what hazard can do. Hazards have the capability of knocking one down, laying down extremely heavy damage, and charging through one's onslaught as they are not easily stunned by typical attacks, such as melee, grenade blasts, or any explosive really. Critical damage, however, can sometimes have an effect. As one fights a crowd, their threat gradually or quickly decreases. As one fights a hazard, their threat and capabilities remain the same until they are eliminated. Certain threats and bosses also increase their threat as they sustain more damage, such as Black Lungs or Grid Inquisitors. So with this in mind, I would argue that more priority rests with hazards than crowds. So on to the comparisons. Crowd control is essentially the same for most enemy types. This only changes with the Vulge, who don't really come in large numbers as they are the cusp between weak and tough enemies. Dark Matter is a bit more tactical because they have different roles and therefore aren't necessarily crowd fighters. There's the Sniper, who typically hugs the sidelines, the Monitors, who put up a shield and remain stationary, and there are the Enforcers and Bulwarks, who typically crowd a given Arc Hunter. But because of their distribution of roles, it's difficult to call them a crowd, and they can be handled similarly between the Assassin and the Demolitionist, with focused fire depending on their distance. Otherwise, crowd control is similar among other enemy types, i.e. Scrappers, Hellbugs, Raiders, and 99ers. So the comparison here will be quick. Alright, here we go. Oh jeez, she's gonna chase after him now. Alright, sweetheart, just hold together. Alright, look, he's just a kid. Oh, okay, well, there they go. Anyways, as we had discussed in our class comparison and assassin review, the assassin does have tools to deal with crowds. The tools, however, are temporary. Without them, they are mainly reliant on their pistol and critical shots, which puts more of a strain on their ability to easily take down targets quickly. Now, Biotoxin is very effective for dealing with multiple weak foes, but if there is too much space between targets, or if the targets are too weak to sustain a single round, then Biotoxin becomes useless for crowds. Otherwise, Hidden Blade is an alternative, but also comes with its limitations. Being up close to enemies guarantees receive damage, and with enough enemies and space between them, the consequences could force an extraction. Even if an assassin wants to remain away from the crowd, their efficiency in handling large numbers is naturally going to be hindered with long-range shooting. Now, for Demolitionists, due to their loadout and relevant skills, dealing with crowds is either easy or very easy. A Demolitionist without the use of their skills and just their preferred loadout is meant to cause damage up to a certain radius. This is the easy part. It becomes very easy when they use cluster projectiles, which is essentially an extension of their blast radius, or when they want to use grenade barrage, hatchling spawner, or even flashbang. Now, I'm not the best Demolitionist or the best assassin/sniper, but after observing their skills against crowds, it is fair to say that maximum potential Demolitionists easily take the win on crowd control over maximum potential assassins. To me, it's kind of like someone on a sugar spike versus a carbohydrate spike. Sugar's going to shoot you up real quick, but then it's going to fall back down real quickly, just like our assassin with Biotoxin. Provided one has close-knit enemies, they can be very effective very quickly, but then after the skill is over, they are reduced to their sniper and pistol, possibly even their hidden blade, which is not nearly as effective. While the Demolitionist is the carbohydrates, leaving one with sustained energy over time. But now enough of science class. Moving on to hazards. As previously stated in our class comparison, tough enemies mainly have their weaknesses in critical damage, just like all other enemies, but not all have easily exposed critical areas. So, does the frequency of the Demolitionist outperform the slower but precise damage of... Does the frequency of the Demolitionist outperform the slower but precise damage of the Assassin? The comparisons will include and exclude use of their skills. The Demolitionist virtually has the same options that they would use for crowd control. The Assassin is best using the Big Bang Sniper, Eviscerate or Evasive Maneuvers, Mark, and Execute, possibly even Scoundrel for certain enemies to completely maximize their potential for damage. Now, the Big Bang has a charge effect, which could possibly take away from their efficiency, but all of this will be factored into the comparison. So let's take a look. We'll first show footage with the use of skills, but keep the active perks, and then show footage with use of skills and perks. I must note that the weapons I'm using have the shield damage mod, aside from the secondaries. So we'll get started. First we're going to go with the grid. Now for grid inquisitors, they seem to come in different classes, such as enhanced or reinforced, and they are shielded foes, not armored. And they have their critical points at the head. When enough health is depleted, they increase their threat by spawning smaller grid crusaders. For our Black Lungs are shielded based enemies and do not come with variations, but after enough vitality is lost, they increase their threat by changing their firing pattern that will demand one's invasive movements more and force delays in their retaliation. Monarchs are health-based foes, and remain consistent with their threat level, but their critical areas are periodically vulnerable. This is dependent on the attack they use and how much damage they receive while their critical spots are open. Tankers are armor-based foes, and are similar to the Monarch in that their threat level does not change upon armor depletion. Their critical areas are the head and the energy unit on their back. Before either of those become exposed, prior damage must be applied to the unit on their back. This puts some stress on the assassin's tactics, but is easy for the demolitionists due to their radial damage. Last we have our enhanced visceras. Visceras are of the Vulge family and are shielded based foes. Their threat level does not change all that much. At most, when their shields are depleted, they charge 3 times in a row. But the attack itself is not devastating, so I wouldn't really call this a change in threat. Afterwards, it reverts back to its normal offensive maneuvers. Now, for the most part, it can be observed that the assassin has the easiest time eliminating hazards with and without skill-based tools. The only time where the efficiency is lacking is with Black Lungs, since their increase in threat forces one to move, making critical shots harder to achieve with a precise weapon. Meanwhile, the Demolitionist is perfectly fine with running and gunning. Otherwise, the assassin trumps the Demolitionist in every other regard. This becomes more pronounced when using maximum firepower. Now, I am aware that there are other tough enemies, such as the Dark Matter Bulwark, the Mutant Minigunner, Forges from the Scrapper family, or even Hulkers. However, they are either too rare for comparison or similar to the enemies in this review. As I said, I am not the best Demolitionist or Assassin, but I attempted to eliminate the displayed enemies as fast as I could given the set parameters. And I will conclude by saying the Demolitionist is the master of crowd control, while the Assassin is the main class for dealing with hazards. Given the priority I have assigned to crowd control and hazards, I will argue that the Assassin is the most offensively capable class, at least as far as high damage output. It is important to keep in mind that sometimes it takes the effort of both crowd control and hazard control, as they are sometimes mixed together. But anyway, that is all this onion really has to say. Junior, you have anything for our guests before they go? Oh, Junior, goddamn. Alright, you know what? Well, maybe that wasn't the greatest idea. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you guys next time.